I'll pass the word. Now I'll pass the word to Noor.
Thank you, Mila. And welcome everyone. We are very excited to have everyone here. We were very pleasantly surprised of how fast the event got booked on Eventbrite. We almost have a full house that signed up. We'll see how many actually show up, but we are very excited that people are actually excited and intrigued by the topic and by the event. So welcome. I'm just gonna introduce a little more about us and then about and why we're here, and then I'm gonna introduce our speakers for today. So we call ourselves Open Space UX. We actually got together, the five of us, and decided that we share a lot of the same principles, including inclusion and transparency and solidarity. And we noticed that we need a lot of work in terms of basically giving solidarity for underrepresented groups in the tech scene and the design scene, in the Berlin workforce in general. And that's actually why we got together and we decided that we are gonna create a more inclusive open space for UX professionals in the Berlin tech scene. So that's why we're here. And following that, we actually decided to start tackling uncomfortable topics. And we decided to start with everybody's favorite uncomfortable topics, which is, of course, money and salaries. We noticed that there's not nearly enough transparency when it comes to talking about money. And we know for a fact that the only way to change and the only way forward is to actually begin the conversation and start addressing these issues. And that's how this event came into being. We're gonna start, this is basically our debut event, and we are basically gonna start addressing this. And we got our four lovely speakers, along with our own moderator, which is Michelle, who's gonna run the discussion. And we are gonna start talking about basically pay gaps in Berlin. We started looking at why is there so much inequality when it comes to pay in the tech scene. We started looking at the gender gaps, but then we decided, we started noticing that there's also a lot of pay gaps, not only gender pay gaps in the tech scene. And that's how we basically came into this point. So without further ado, I'm gonna start just introducing the speakers here, and then I'm gonna hand over the mic to Michelle. Our first speaker for today is Hang. Hang is actually the outcomes manager at Ironhack Berlin during the week, coach on the weekends, and foodie in the evenings. Having a career change background in hospitality and management, tech recruitment, and career coaching, salary topics were always part of the conversation, be it from of negotiating salaries as a job seeker herself, or as a recruiter, or supporting career changers to negotiate their offers. For her, it's about identifying people's potential and creating opportunities for them to prove themselves. Welcome, Hang. We're very happy to have you here. Our second speaker is Isabel. Hi, Isabel, and welcome. Um, Isabel is actually a product management leader with strong business background. Isabel has worked with companies like Lufthansa, Zalando, and she also got the chance to start a company in logistics from scratch. Now her challenge is to apply technology in dermatology, driving the product team at Formel Skin while being a mother. Welcome, Isabel. Yes, so next we have Mirna. Hi, Mirna. Mirna is currently the Total Rewards Manager for Europe at Delivery Hero. She's one of those psychologists who truly love statistics, so she decided to make the most of her combo of analytical and people skills by working in compensation. She started her career in a tech startup in the UK, where she worked closely with the CEO to make the people processes grow and mature. She then moved to Spain to become a talent and rewards consultant to help more companies set up their compensation policies. She was the SME for the tech industry and worked in the first pay for skills projects in Spain. She also spent some hours flying airplanes and never landed correctly. Welcome, Mirna. Last but not least, we have Rory from Red Sofa. Following a successful and occasionally simultaneous career in both hospitality and music events, Rory began his career recruiting designers in Berlin in 2017. Since then, he's built design teams for a broad range of companies, ranging from startups looking to make their first design hire, all the way through to building design teams for innovation hubs for multi-billion turnover corporations. He's a keen advocate for diversity hiring and is very active in the Berlin design scene, dedicating his time to organizations such as Ironhack, where he offers help and support to junior designers looking to get their foot on the ladder with their first career steps. Welcome, Rory and everyone. And now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over the mic to Michelle so we can get the ball rolling.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I think we can start sharing the screen. Perfect. Hello, I'm Michelle. I'm a senior UX researcher, and I'm really happy to lead this. I realized in preparing for this experience that it was a lot like what I do as a UX researcher. So I dug deep into the topic as well as interviewed each of our speakers to help us kind of fashion a nice conversation together. So how this is going to work is we're going to tackle sort of 4 areas of this topic. The first being setting the landscape around what is pay equality versus equity, what is salary transparency, who's affected by pay gaps. Then we'll kind of move into understanding your worth in the market, how you can benchmark your skill sets. What is it like in the startup scene or the enterprise scene in Berlin? And then we'll go into negotiation tactics and some advice and discussion for promotion, for new jobs, for relocating, etc. And then we'll wrap up kind of talking about how we can start to empower each other to tackle the pay gap issue. And then at the end, we'll open a space for questions from the audience. And I think that's a good place for us to start. So I'm going to lean on Myrna because Myrna is a compensation and benefits manager inside of her company. So she provides us a really unique perspective. And Myrna, can you kind of start us off by explaining to us the difference between pay equity versus pay equality, or equity versus equality?
Okay, thanks, Michelle, and hi, everyone. So yes, as I said, I'm the weirdo. I love compensation. I'm the dark side of HR. Is the one that you never have to piss off because I manage the numbers. So I'm going to be giving you a different insights on the numbers, but I'm going to be speaking as well from my professional background, but also as a female and also from my personal opinion on some things. So pay, starting with pay equity, pay equality, gender pay gap. These are terms that we have started using very, very recently in HR, and it's because legislation goes slow, and then we adapt to legislation and we adapt to what we have to do. So before I go into equity and equality, because the legislation doesn't differentiate that, it's important to understand there's a very big difference when we speak about gender pay gap and gender pay equity, okay? Gender pay gap is what happens when you put all females and all males and you compare the salaries, but you don't take into consideration, let's say, anything else. And when you speak about pay equity, is about, and this is when the equality comes in, pay equity and equality. It's in this terminology, we don't differentiate it much. So pay equity is when you do the same job and you get paid different. Then it's not the pay is not equity. It's not equal. Okay, so these are the differences. Let me tell you a small story. I will come to my personal life a lot, so you will get to know me quite a bit maybe today. My ex-husband has a construction company, okay, and I was living in the UK, and he has 4 construction workers, and then he hired. I was very into, come on, you work only men's. It's like, oh, come on, you need to have more diversity in your company. So he hired a receptionist for his office, and he hired a finance assistant. And then when UK kicked off with the gender pay gap reporting, I was telling him, oh, I'm gonna check your gender pay gap. Obviously, he was the CEO, he was getting a wealthy salary, ex-husband, wealthy salary, and he had a sales manager as well with a very, very wealthy salary. And then the construction workers that were paid quite well. However, the receptionist and the finance assistant were getting paid less. So you can imagine that the gender pay gap, well, if you want to have a guess, you can have a guess. What could be the gender pay gap in this situation? Say a percentage, type a percentage.
A percentage of the gender pay gap in that
Yes.
situation?
20, 20.
I'm going to say 30%.
30, 40, 30. Oh, you're being so good. Leah, very well. You're getting there. Almost there, almost there.
30 to 50%? 70?
More. More. 199% of
Whoa.
gender pay gap raw data, okay? Obviously, you were comparing things that were not the same. So it's a small company with a male CEO, head of sales is a male, and then you hire the females in the lowest paid positions. Gender pay gap is massive. And then you have a lot of males as well in the company, and you have 2 females. So obviously it's not the same, no? When you now work the pay gap, trying to think what would happen if you have the same number of females and the same number of males, the pay gap reduces to 60%. Because obviously we know that there are some industries that are more male populated or female populated, which is this case. So now you have the concept of gender pay gap. What happens if I hire 2 people to finance assistants? So my ex-husband increased his workload and he needed someone else to take on invoices. And he was looking at CVs. And actually, he decided to hire someone that was male. And here is when pay equality kicks in. You need to be paying the same money or an equal and fair salary. And I prefer the term fair pay than any other of the terms. You need to be paying the same salary for the same role, the same skills, and the same experience. And this is equal pay, and this is equality in pay. I don't know if, I think the concept got clear. Thank you, my ex-husband, if he ever watched the video.
Thank you, Mona, for kind of setting the stage for us there. In that case, you're talking very specifically about gender pay gaps. However, we do know that pay gaps are across all kinds of intersectional topics. For example, parenthood, racial minorities, different nationalities, people relocating. So I would maybe, since we were on the topic of gender pay, I would ask Isabel to kind of give us an insight into what does that mean when you're a parent, or observations you've made around this topic.
Yeah, hi. So hi to everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I mean, I recently became a mother. I can maybe give you 2 insights that along my way I realized, and how I would tackle it also the next time, probably again, because it worked out quite well for me. Yeah, basically the first one is around the stage before parenthood, which is pregnancy. That's something that is a very tricky topic. Why it is so tricky is basically the fact, so if you are at a stage where you are about to ask for a salary raise, for example, you don't do it before you actually make your pregnancy public, I would strongly go for doing it before making it public. I feel that the world is not ready yet to negotiate salaries regardless of a pregnancy or not. It sounds very sad, and I would also love to live in a different world, but like ultimately you should always look at your own interest at that stage, because if you are not going to ask for a salary increase before you make your pregnancy public, it could happen that you end up with like maybe 2 years of not having a salary adoption, just because you won't probably, I mean, it always depends on your lead, right? If you have a really good person leading you, that you can trust in, that you know it's not going to be this way, then don't take my word for granted, yeah. But ultimately, I would definitely ask before that, because otherwise you might end up with not having a salary increase like before going in on mother how you say, like mother leave, Mutterschutz, the German word for it. Parental leave.
Yeah.
But parental leave is a bit different, because this is basically for the every of the caretakers to be
yes.
maternity leave. Yes, thank you. But yeah, ultimately there's a chance that you don't get a salary adoption before you go on maternity leave, and if you come back at maybe a few months later, up to you, then there is a chance that you might have to show again why you're worth it to get a salary adoption. And yeah, so that's one of the things that I learned. I would rally for doing it before you make your pregnancy public. It's a sad world out there. But yeah,
I think what you're doing is you're highlighting sort of the space that we're currently in. And the question is how we move away from this. And I know, Myrna, we've also talked, and I think, Hang, you've discussed this before, about transitioning careers is sometimes the only opportunity women get, or people of color, or racial minorities, or people of LGBTIQ communities to get an opportunity to get raises. I would love to understand, you know, there's also the situation of people relocating or transitioning careers, and these create subsets of pay gaps, because we tend to not know our worth, and we tend to not know where we can position ourselves in the market. So talking about the transitional space, Hang, could you speak a little bit to how does someone who's transitioning careers, because this is really your specialty, how does someone transitioning careers kind of prepare themselves for how to value themselves in the market?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and also hi to everyone here who's listening in tonight. I think, you know, and maybe also, since Myrna set a really good example by sharing a personal experience, I thought I'd do the same. So I'm a you know, career changer myself, right? So I was in hospitality, and then I moved to tech recruitment, and then from tech recruitment I moved into coaching. So I faced 2 career changes, 2 career transitions, and I think the first thing that I noticed when I initially changed into tech recruitment, which is very, very far away from tech, is that I had a kind of trouble to position myself, because I didn't know what was the norm, and I didn't know whether the salary structures in tech were actually adapted to career changes, because in hospitality, these things were super linear. You start from a junior, you move up to mid-level, and eventually you become a senior and maybe a manager. And I think something that I learned here is to really prioritize what is the priority for me right now. Is it moving industries? Is it going into a specific job, which is my dream job? Or is it the salary that I'm aiming for? And I think for me, the importance here was to get the foot into the door, which I did. So I agreed to a salary that was literally on par with what I was earning before. So it was no career, I guess, salary progression in that sense. But I did also have, you know, a conversation right in the offer call where I was I was asking about do you have probationary reviews? So if I, let's say, pass probation at 6 months, I think it's on average in Berlin, is there a possibility to have a conversation to reevaluate my performance, to show that I have proven myself, and then to adjust my salary? And we did. And I think having that possibility definitely made it easier for me to take on that offer, because otherwise I might have considered to keep looking for a company that actually would have offered that. So I think always keep out the opportunity and address it very transparently. Well, actually, thanks for the offer. This was not quite the salary I was looking for, but having the opportunity with you sounds great. And if we have the possibility to reevaluate, then yes. So that was kind of the approach that I went for, and also something that has been working quite well for the career changes that I'm supporting.
Yeah, that's great. Transitioning, okay, so that's around the topic of like promoting. But to understand that your worth, we need to be benchmarking. And this is where I would bring Rory in a little bit, because I know, Rory, with Red Sofa, you've provided the Berlin scene with some salary transparency, roughly. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that survey and some of the insights you've gotten both from the corporate side as well as individuals around how that transparency has, impacted the way we're thinking about salaries in Berlin.
Sure, happily. Yeah, so the salary review is something I think we did it the year before, but I just joined in January. We released them at the start of the year. There's a number of reasons why we do it. It's good that we're able to do it because we spend all day speaking to people within our different niches. So we cover product, marketing, engineering, all manners of kinds of jobs within marketing agencies as well. And obviously me, myself, covering design. So on average, I'll speak to like 15, 20 designers a week, and we have to be really straight about things like salary when we're applying for jobs. So I do get to do lots of like quantitative analysis within that. So I do know the scene very well. And then within our team, there's 5 other people. So we all know the salaries very well. So we thought, let's put all this information together into a salary survey. Initially, it started as, or the way I started using it as, was something to give to clients to deliver a bit more benefit. I don't know if anyone's ever been a hiring manager here, but you would probably be at the end of loads of really boring messages from recruiters because people would just send you spam telling you they have the best candidate ever, etc., etc. So what we do as a business is, write content, actually deliver some benefit beyond trying to tell people we have awesome candidates. And that was one of the things we wanted to use to, it's a good touch point to get back in touch with your clients at the start of the year, saying, here's our salary survey, we hope you find this useful. And then I started sending it out to candidates, and that's when it became almost like a sort of disruptive piece of content. So, I was sending it out to candidates like, oh, here's this as well, we've just built it, we're really proud of it. It's really insightful. Hopefully you find it gives you some good guidance. And I had quite a few people come back to me saying, I never realized I was so horrifically underpaid. And like my vision or a view of like how to discuss salaries it is an awkward thing. So, if I was speaking to a candidate for the first time, I'll ask it at the end of a half-hour conversation, so I built up a bit of rapport. But I can understand how you were, one designer working in an organization, or even if you're one designer working in a company where there's a design team of 3, it's highly unlikely that you're going to discuss salary with your colleagues, or you're just going to assume everyone's on the same. So people started seeing it and thinking, wow, I'm massively undervalued. So that's where it became like a bit of sort of disruptive content to an extent. So, it resulted in a lot of people coming to me saying, I need to get a pay rise or find a new job. So it was quite beneficial for our business in that way. But that's not the reason we did it. We just wanted to share our knowledge and the data that we had with the industry. And then there's one funny story. Obviously, I can't say names, but it was we sent it to a client of ours who my boss is really good friends with. And we sent it to some of their staff as well, because we all know those guys anyway, because we worked with them for years. And the client got in touch with my boss moaning. He's like, why are all my staff leaving? They're all moaning that they're underpaid. And our simple response was, well, just pay them more. You need to be valued in the job. Your employees are the people that keep your company afloat and make it. I know obviously there's limitations with this when you're running a business, but also this is why I think it's good to have an open conversation around salaries, because yes, it's an awkward subject, but B, people that work really hard don't deserve to be underpaid. And I'm not saying all companies do this, I've seen a big spike in, you know, how much designers do get paid in general in Berlin. I feel like designs are much better understood and far more valued part of the product team now. But yeah, I think it's helpful to provide people the point of reference, especially those who might not be comfortable just or as brave to just ask their colleagues about these kind of things, because it is still a touchy subject. Again, the more we speak about it, the more that it will become a kind of like more fluid conversation. But you know, if we can just share something that's a simple PDF that gives people a good point of reference, then, you know, why not? I hope that answers your question and gives some insight from our side.
Yeah, I love the fact that it's this disruptive, you know, content that reminds us that like salary transparency plays a valuable part in how we begin to tackle this. And so I thought I'd quickly turn to you, Myrna, to describe what benchmarking means, because this sort of sets the tone for then the next stage, right? Which is asking for promotions, looking for other opportunities. And then after you, Myrna, I'd love the rest of you to kind of share, what does that look like once you understand what you're going for? So Myrna, if you could give us sort of a setting of salary transparency and benchmarking, and then we'll go from there.
Sure, and I think Rory did a great job. I was looking at the research and it was awesome. So yes, so benchmarking, what do people like me do to get paid? Basically, in order to benchmark a role, first you need to know the level of this role, okay? So we need to be very honest on the level of our roles, entry level, mid-professional. You have tools in LinkedIn to know what they are asking for in the role. But apart from that, and now I'm gonna be a bit futuristic because I love future, and I think that you will remember my words in 5 years' time, okay? It's not enough anymore to benchmark your role, okay? What you need to benchmark is the skill sets that you have and at what level of experience you have this skill set. Because you can be a director, you can be a senior manager, but you might not know anything about responsive web design. And responsive web design is something that is not prevalent at all, and it's highly paid. If you have that skill, it's a premium, it's a skill premium that companies are willing to pay more for it. So let's start thinking a bit with our future in mind, okay? We first, in order to benchmark ourselves and how companies will benchmark us is, okay, how horrible, and I hate it, how many years of experience I have. I don't have that many, and to be honest, I have very good skill sets that companies like about me. And this pays off at the end. So how many years of experience do I have? How I am, what are my skill set, my soft skills? I am ready to be a manager. I want to be a manager. I am a subject matter expert, or I'm an intermediate level or an early level because I changed jobs and now I want to try user design. It depends. First, look at yourself and then look at your skill set. What do you know? What are the skill sets in your profession that are hot skills? Okay, I have a small graph from my data provider just to show you the prevalence of skills in Berlin, in the tech industry, of your professions. Okay, so we can see user experience is highly prevalent. So whenever you look for a role, this is a lot of people that have this skill. And if you start going down and down, you see usability testing. Interesting. Responsive web design, only 14% of the people that user experience designers, product designers that responded this have the skill of responsive web design. Design thinking, also only 14%. Obviously, this is going to be highly paid. This is for you to start thinking about these things. Another one that is highly paid is the product management one. Okay, and the storytelling. So start thinking about your skill set, both the technical skill set, which I'm presenting here, but also your soft skills. It's going to help you think more about yourself and be more confident when you're kind of selling yourself to a company, you know, and to the person you have in front. It's like a date. It's a professional date. So show how good you are and benchmark yourself against these things. Ways to benchmark yourself. I think Rory has the key here. So I was gonna come up with different things, but come on, go to Rory. I would always go to Rory. Other sources, LinkedIn ads. When you are transitioning, when you're moving to a different company, some companies put the salary ranges, so you can start gouging it and you can start thinking. Another one, gig economy. Gig economy is the best way to benchmark skills. If you go into websites where you are paid for a gig and you see, how is it called, Rory? The freelance day rates. Freelance day rates give you the skill percentage extra. Better, because companies are, I'm sorry, we are still not able to come up with these percentages. So we need to rely on freelancers. How much is the rate that freelancers are asking for a skill set in particular? So you can also do that. There's pages where you can look at. And also community. You have, so this group of people is starting an amazing community. And I think making a community helps you gauge different salaries with each other. So that would be the other key.
That was fantastic, Myrna. I definitely know Isabel has something to say to this, so I would pass it over to you immediately.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it really well summarizes also basically parts of my career paths. And now I also saw a little bit why I did it, maybe moving backward. But also Hank also already told us about like maybe stepping back on a potential salary that you could have. And going into, yeah, basically taking up a salary that you're not very comfortable with at the beginning, but from which you can actually grow. So for me, it was, it started actually with my first step after university, which was product management at Zalando. It was a trainee, and I think I already saw another trainee colleague of mine already in the talk. I want to shortly say hi to her. I hope she's still here. But yeah, so essentially we started off with a very low salary in 2015. And I remembered, because I was working for Lufthansa back then, and I remembered that I could have earned much more if I would have stayed with Lufthansa and worked as, I barely remember what it was, the title there. But nonetheless, I decided to go to like Zalando and start working in product management. Though, I mean, my full family basically told me, are you really sure you want to go to Zalando? What are the working conditions there? Because everyone knew from media, you know, back then, and yeah, it wasn't that well covered in the media, at least. But nonetheless, I did it, and I had a comparable, very low salary to what I could have earned for 1.5 years, basically, up to the point where we were able to negotiate again. And then I was able to bump it relatively high because of the skill set that I earned in that 1.5 years. And this kind of also goes for every step that I do, is I rather try to either earn the skill sets or earn a specific title at some point. And then the salary will come, I mean, not naturally, you still have to like argue for it, but it will come more easily, and especially you have more confidence to also argue for it, right? Because you already have the skill set. Yeah, that's my point to it.
Yeah, and there's also in that is like the self-reflective side where we need to kind of evaluate what experiences we want. And I know Hong and Roy, you might be able to, either of you speak to this, like sort of the different expectations when it comes to startups versus small, medium versus enterprise, and how that plays out in you know, determining what your worth is in that context, I suppose. If anyone wants to, either of you want to speak to that. Roy or Hong, you have, okay, so Hong and Roy.
Okay, I'll just take half time and I'll leave it to Rory. So I think there definitely are big differences. So what we usually do at Ironhack, where we kind of prepare all of the graduates for the market and really making their case by getting offers that actually fulfill their needs and their wants, right? Because everyone's got a lifestyle and dependencies to finance. I think here it's always very clear that obviously early stage startups are very budget limited. And I think, you know, anyone who wants to learn fast, take on ownership, is willing to compromise on the salary. This is where we clearly say, then, you know, startup might be a good place to go because you can grow very fast by taking on additional skills and responsibility. For people who, let's say, for example, do need a bit more of a financial stability, this is where we definitely recommend to aim for scale ups. So companies who are usually on the market for about 3 to 5 years, very fast growth in terms of team. So usually you can see on LinkedIn if there was a percentage growth. So usually you kind of see upward trends. Obviously with COVID, that could have been a bit of a dip. But I think LinkedIn gives a really nice overview on how the company has grown in the past and gives a good indicator on how it could be moving forward. But this is something where people, give you an example, developers or even designers could even aim for a 10K higher range than for early stage startups, if not even 15 or 20. Corporates, obviously, again, I think that's another range where we would say it's a bit higher than scale out, but there's a bit of an overlap. But again, this is something where obviously companies are looking for more specialized roles. If there's people who want to be more of a specialist and less of a generalist, then I think the corporate is to go. But yeah, definitely some differences. And usually we ask the graduates to define their needs. What is it that you really need and what is it that you want? And try to identify that and find that in the market for yourself.
Roy, do you want to take over with your
Yeah,
perspective on this?
I'd agree with everything Hang said. I think, so if we talk about the large corporates first, so I think with large corporates, generally overall, people will get paid more. I do find that between the senior and like VP of design, there's quite a significant gap. Whereas if you compared that to a startup between a senior and like a head of or VP of design, the gap's a bit smaller. I think corporates will just throw big money at big people to keep them on board. You know, I spoke with people who have worked for big companies for years and they're always unhappy with the job, but every time they try and leave, they just get more money. We call it like golden handcuffs. Like, you know, it depends, you know, changing jobs are scary and sometimes you might have to take a pay cut. But with the startups, sometimes you'll start on a lower salary, but that experience you can get early on in your career is really, really important because you could be a one person, what they call them, like Swiss Army knives, unicorns. I don't know what the term is now. I've heard them all, but like it means you're just handling every single aspect of design for that company whilst working with a product manager doing research. Yeah, it can burn you out a little bit and it is quite intense, but it's also quite a good crash course as well. It's a good way to sharpen your skills really quickly. And it also means that you can stamp your mark on a product and say, look, for the last 2 years, I did this. And then if you have statistics to back it up with in your case studies and your portfolio about, you know, increasing optimization rate or sales or things like this, or just product growth, then that's always fantastic. And one thing I do find with people when they're looking to level up, there's a particularly hard point for designers when they get to like senior designer and they want to step up to lead, because a lot of companies will ask for like lead experience. So this is what I say to people generally: if you're in a big corporate and you want to get to lead and that person above you is trapped in those golden handcuffs and they're never going to go anywhere because they keep on getting more money thrown at them, I'd say just bounce down to a smaller size company and then get your leadership skills there and then keep on taking them up and across. But yeah, obviously there's different benefits to all. But yeah, generally in big corporates, they're a bit more of a safer environment. But also one other thing I would say with candidates about when they're negotiating the salary, we did touch on it a little bit earlier. So if I had an offer for a candidate and they weren't quite happy with it, I'd always, and we couldn't push it any further, we'd always get the client to write in the contract that there'd be a pay review within 6 months' time, so that when they finish their probation period, they can then review the pay. Because obviously all the candidates we bring to companies are amazing and deliver a lot of benefit, but there's also only so much that you can see during the interview process. You know, I've had this in like previous jobs of mine in hospitality where, you know, it's like start in this section, let's see if you're as good as you make out, and then after 3 months we'll review it. So you go in and you're kind of a little bit more driven sometimes even, and you just push it and you prove yourself, and then the ball's in your court and you say, look, this is what I've done. I proved myself here. Clients are generally quite warm with that. Again, you know, sort of, especially with early stage startups when they're taking on one designer because they can only afford that and they're not far enough down their journey to warrant a whole design team. The budgets are a bit tighter, but once that design has been in there for 6 months and is clearly bringing quite a lot of benefit and probably helping product managers to realize the benefit of design, then that's when you can start pushing for a higher salary.
Awesome.
But it's good to get these things in writing and discuss them right at the start as well.
Yeah, so like what I'm hearing is a lot of talk about placing the ownership on us as the individual or person seeking the opportunity to figure out our benefits. But there's also a lot of risk in that, right? Because we have to be vulnerable and potentially fight for something. And if anyone can speak to sort of skill sets or advice on how to prepare yourselves for negotiating through that process, because it can be scary, from personal experiences of either experiencing discrimination in your organization and seeking support to navigate it, or anything along those lines. I would open the table.
I'd say I know it's just me that does this because I'm a bit of a weirdo, but like if I'm like interviewed for jobs, or if I'm gonna have like an awkward conversation with a flatmate or you know, a friend, just don't just go through it in your head, but say the sentences out loud. Or if you have someone that you can trust in, to just do like a pretend conversation with, because I'm a massive overthinker and I'll think about things and I'll think about them and then like I'll start to speak about them. But sometimes if you just think about things and then jump straight into the conversation, you haven't like exercise those sentences, then sometimes it can start to be a bit tricky and I get like my nerves come across when I talk as well. Whereas if you have a conversation with a close friend, you know, get your friend to pretend to be your hiring manager or a colleague and have that conversation with them and try and get your friend to, you know, be that person in that mindset to their best ability. It's like training yourself for the conversation. I think once you've been through it, as silly as it feels to start with, it really works. Trust me, I've used it quite a lot in the past.
Yeah, it's great. It's like rehearsing in preparation. I know Isabel had her hand up first, and I think I know the story she wants to tell, so I would give it to you and then pass it to Hannah.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So I basically have like two stories to that, and both of them dribble down to the same concept. Is basically get yourself someone that you can always talk to. And who has also the domain knowledge that you're working in. So, for example, for me at the beginning, I was actually the one who was being talked to, because a colleague of mine, he started like opening up about his salary, and I encouraged him by just telling him my salary. And that made him really like very comfortable to go to our lead and discuss salaries. And I mean, transparency is definitely one thing that really gives you the motivation and also the feeling comfortable to talk about these topics. And the other one is you should, as I already said, you should get someone you can constantly talk to. So for me, it's for example, my boyfriend. I always see him like some kind of soccer trainer who's standing at the line and screaming at me, and but also motivating me, and he's always making like a comparison, saying like, okay, this person does that, and you're much more capable of doing that, so you're definitely worth it, right? So if it not a person from the domain, you might not believe that person, right? So get yourself the person who has knowledge to the domain, also maybe the hiring area, so experiences in hiring and seeing like different salary ranges, and that gives you a lot of comfortable feeling to really address these topics, and all of a sudden they are not as awkward anymore as they used to be.
Yeah. Hong, I noticed your hand was up next if you wanted to take the stage.
I'm gonna keep it short since I know there's quite a few more questions that you are going to ask. But aside from what Rory and Isabel mentioned in terms of preparation and talking to colleagues, I completely agree. I think that's very helpful, just to also make you feel less nervous about it and make you not doubt yourself as much as you would normally do if you were alone. But I think it's also really important to prepare, you know, alternatives. So, you know, what is my best ideal outcome that I want to achieve in this conversation? And what if my manager says no? You know, how am I going to, what's my next best alternative? And thinking about that is really helpful, because I don't know what it is, and I felt the same at the very beginning. A negotiation doesn't have to be a one-off conversation. You can pause. You could say, okay, thanks very much for listening and having this discussion with me. I would like to take a few days to think about this, and then prepare again, because I think that's, you know, the more information you have, the better you can make your case. And I think feeling comfortable with pausing this and continuing it on another day can actually give you a lot more leverage, because then you can make your case more effectively, because then you know, what is it that I need to actually get that pay rise, and then, you know, going back to what you've achieved and making your case, right? So that's something that I just wanted to add.
Yeah, what I love that you're pointing out is that, you know, we personally have to make these initiatives. We can't expect an organization to just see how hard we're working and give us those opportunities. So there is an onus, right, on us to find those conversations and lean on the people around us to navigate how to do that. Myrna, did you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, now I'm going to add the quantitative part of it. Market research suggests that if you are moving roles, ask for 10%, 20% more than what you're getting paid. Other research, I think this one is from Mercer, was suggesting that promotion increase goes between 5 to 15%. So have these numbers in mind just when you're asking, so you know that you're asking something that it's comfortable, okay? Not for you, for everyone. And be prepared with examples as well. If you bring me examples of why your skill sets are this good and why you deserve a pay rise, not comparing yourself with anyone else, it's you are only and unique and you're valuable. So bring data into the table.
That was beautiful. We are all unique, and I think it's about like shaping our value and presenting it in informed ways. Is what it kind of sounds like to me. I'm sort of curious. Again, we've been putting a lot of this pressure on the individual, you know, to kind of try to close the gap. However, as we know, we can't act alone in any of this, like tackling the pay gap, on whether it's from a perspective of a racial or a racial minority, a gender minority, or LGBTIQ, or etc., does require sort of empowering each other. And I'm wondering if any of you have some reflections on, you know, how can we use our social capital, and social capital meaning our position in our company, our position in our communities or organizations, or being a man or being in a senior position. What are any of your thoughts on how do we empower towards getting closer to these conversations being normalized? Whoever wants to jump in first, go for it.
I wanted to add additionally something to Myrna's talk, which was about if you go into a salary negotiation, there are some other options to salary that you should always keep in mind, which is there's equity there. I mean, in some startups, it's an option. There's also a salary negotiation when it comes, for example, to the next funding round, because ultimately that's something that you are as a team working towards too, right? So even if a startup might not be able to pay your salary at a specific point in time, it might be in the future. And the last one is the position, because a position is something that, as I already said, is something that you already work towards too. And then at some point, the salary will be easier to basically argue for. these are the points to Mirna. But yeah, towards your question, Michelle, I think for me, for example, whenever I am having an interview, whenever I'm thinking about basically if I take a person or not, what's the salary or not, all these kind of thoughts that you might have, I tend to that's very normal in people, that you always jump into an opinion that you have. And what I'm trying to, before I actually like press the button of sending my personal feedback, is basically trying to make myself aware of everything that I might have left out, or where I might have an unconscious bias. I mean, I definitely, I can't say that I'm perfect in this and that I don't have it, but being aware of it is already, I think, a good first step. That's so much to me. I don't know if maybe someone else has more experience in that area.
Rory, I see your hand up. Did you want to tackle that question or the unbiased topic?
Yeah, just around like, well, being transparent about salaries to an extent, and so the culture of this in companies, or even just within departments within companies. So it's something that some of the bigger companies I work with do it when we're like pitching, telling candidates about that company. It's always really good when you work with a company, they've got a clear progress map as well. So, if you join as a senior designer, you achieve this, you move up to this level, to that level. And I think if companies start to advertise that, maybe just within a department at least, about like, this is what our senior product designers get paid, you could put a percentage on it of like 10-15% or whatever, and then after 2 years this is what you get, and after 3 years this is what you get. Because I think a lot of companies probably have these plans and these visions, but it's like everything. If you don't share the data and give people knowledge, then they don't know about that. And I think I'd like to feel that if everyone joined a company and there was a really like rigid career path outlined for them about like, if you do this, you get here, you get paid this much, X, Y, Z, then I think that can help to, start the conversation and make it a little bit more open. And then over time, hopefully that will just become a normal thing. It'll be something that everybody expects. So yeah, just outlining a clear career progression path, and also giving, maybe not specific data around figures, but a figure with at least a percentage margin on it as well, could be a good idea for the future.
Yeah, that's great. Does anyone want to add to that? I'll open the stage. Or even, the bias thing is really important to acknowledge, because now we have sort of in companies often this obligatory unbiased training. However, it's like a one-off experience, and you're not necessarily putting it into practice. And as a researcher who works with users, I constantly have to be aware, but also practice and recognizing constantly where my biases stand. If anybody has some reflections on how to tackle that, whether it's bias towards your colleagues, which leads to enviness around their promotion, or it's bias towards the people that you're hiring, or etc. If anyone has experiences, or just, in fact, Hang, you might have a perspective on this in terms of like people who are relocating from other countries or come from different national backgrounds into the Berlin tech scene, the struggles that they often go through, for example.
Yeah, and thanks for rephrasing that. I was already thinking very hard on how to answer it, but now I know what I'm talking about. Yes, so I think, especially in Berlin now, we have a lot of people who are obviously not from Germany, and Berlin being Berlin, I think we have a lot of people from not just Europe, but also from East, even further west, people who come here to either go into tech or to just find, I guess, a better life for themselves, and sometimes even their families. And I think when it comes to salary negotiation, it's a quite tough topic for them especially. And I think me with Asian origins, I think I know that money in this case is not necessarily the top priority. What is the priority is a stable job, because when it comes to I guess this cultural aspect, and I don't know what the diversity now in our audience is like, But in Asia, for example, you do have a financial dependency or responsibility for your family, for your parents especially. And I think, you know, knowing how hard it is to get a job there, people tend to more easily give in here, you know, not knowing what they could ask for and just looking for this stability, which is their primary need. So instead of looking for self-actualization, they're trying to fulfill a very basic need, right? And they don't just do it for themselves, they do it for their family, for anyone who is financially dependent on them. And I think, you know, we have a few people like that at Ironhack, and I can see it in the choices in applications that they do. So instead of aiming for entry-level positions, they would even consider internships or, you know, any other short-term commitment that would allow them to quickly gain the experience and then, you know, consider a full-time job. So I think it's a very tough topic for people who move to Europe from somewhere else where maybe salaries are not usually that high. And I think having, you know, salary reports, this is something that we usually provide in terms of links. The only thing in salary reports I feel could definitely be considered more is, you know, not just looking at this level of seniorities, but also looking at what kind of company types are these salaries represented. So if you're a junior in a startup, you are up differently paid than a junior in a corporate, right? And I think being a bit more detailed in these reports would definitely help with these people to also just think, okay, if I got into tech, what would that mean for me? And it would mean a lot, right? In terms of what they had before. So there's definitely a big, how do you call this? A very big story behind this.
Yeah, and I do see this, that like those are the areas actually where companies can exploit that opportunity, because then you might have a senior level from a different country coming into the Berlin scene, and in their perspective, they're taking on a pay rise, but within the context of Berlin, it's actually they're not being truly valued for their worth. So it's kind of exploitative, right? So Myrna, I know you had some ideas around, you know, if we want to tackle this topic and we want our companies or organizations or communities we're working with to be paying fairly and having these conversations openly, is there any advice around how we can start that in our organization? Who could we talk to? How do we bring that up where we start advocating for different types of people in our own companies?
That's a very good question. It depends always. So yes, and I was thinking actually on the difference. So we are speaking from startup perspective, then I'm speaking from corporate, because you won't find my role in a startup, obviously. So it's very different how you tackle these conversations and what you do and what the company can actually do, depending on the size, depending on the history, depending on a lot of things. For example, I said I wouldn't speak about my company, but that's something I do like about my company a lot, is that diversity is key, and not only in onboarding, but it's key every single day, and it's key in performance reviews, it's key when you recruit, all the positions need to be inclusive. So obviously the company has a lot to play in, and the first thing that I would do as an employee is first look at myself and start advocating for this, and then my team members, and then call out to HR. So if you see a job description that is not inclusive, you have the right to call it out. The same with pay gaps, and you have all the right. And I'm a very creative person, but today I feel very quantitative, because I think I have to actually give you this other side, no? The objective, be objective with yourself. And we all have biases, and we all have, so I've been in the conversation when I wanted to ask for pay rise. And I think we all in this call, we've been there, and we feel that we are maybe not enough, or that I won't be able to do it because I don't know, because I put myself something, and society and culture and companies have put this on me as well. So it's not my fault. So I need to break this and be objective with myself. And then when I try to be objective in my head, and I start doing my objective research on my role, my skills, my take, my career as a unique individual that I am, is where I'm able to actually achieve to make these conversations happen and to make other people also think about these conversations in my organization. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, that was so beautiful. I just want to heart you all over. Does anyone else want to kind of expand on what that means, like advocating for yourself or for others in your organization, or speaking up? Or I'll just open the stage to anyone who wants to add. Han, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this when I was listening to Nana, because so we usually have like a week where we prepare for the job hunt, including negotiation. And this is where I actually asked the graduates to do a SWOT analysis on themselves. So, you know, you can do SWOT not just on companies and the market or products, you can do it on yourself. And this is where you try to identify your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and your threats. And the key exercise here is to obviously turn your weaknesses and threats into strength and opportunities, right? By matching either your strength, you know, you can turn, let's say, I don't know if you know about the, you focus on what you can influence, and everything else like the weather, the traffic, COVID, you can't influence, right? So it's about how you deal with it. And this is where your strengths lie in. So how are you going to turn a threat like COVID into something better by using your strength, right? So I think this whole exercise, I heard some feedback from some students, it felt a bit artificial, but I feel like when I was doing it, I just felt like I took the time to understand what I'm good at and what is available to me. I was trying to be resourceful. I was talking to people who were in the job that I wanted to. I spoke to, 20 coaches. I had like 12 coffee chats before I got into coaching. And I got so many valuable information by asking, not just for resources and learnings and salary ranges, but I also was, asking if they were happy to coach me on negotiating this topic. And I think speaking to people who have a similar transition or who have a similar background as you can really feel empowering, because that what makes you feel not alone. And, you can learn from their mistakes, from their best practices, and just do it better, and then come back to them and say, listen, I did what you suggested me to do. It worked really well. Thank you so much. And that feels really rewarding too. So I feel like really, don't do this alone, and start from knowing yourself, really leverage everything that you have and be resourceful. I think that can really help a lot. Yeah.
Does anybody want to add on to this, Isabel or Rory? Isabel?
Yeah, I was basically just reminded of one situation that we had back at Zalando. It's not something that I was organizing or in there, but this was basically the moment where salary transparency was all over a sudden a thing, because I think it was one developer. Zalando, it was 2015 probably around this. It was already quite big, not as big as it is right now. But this person started to basically collect salaries from other people, opened like a normal Excel sheet, and whoever wanted to basically get access to it had to share their salary. And this basically took off, and all of a sudden, I think 1,000 employees were already part of that list. And that made Zalando finally also like taking over the topic, right? So taking over, of course, also the communication, right? Because that's their ultimate goal, that they are the ones also controlling it in a way, but that made them really do analysis around the pay gaps that are between, not only gender pay gaps, but also, for example, the situations in the different departments. So how much, diversity is actually within the department. It's not something that you can change very fast, because it also ultimately depends on what kind of people are on the market. But at least there is transparency around it. So it was an initiative by one of the just one developer starting off, and it got quite big.
But I think it's such a great example of like taking on one gesture that then creates enough noise that the organization itself realizes it actually needs to take some ownership over what its employees are wanting to talk about and address.
Yeah, exactly. It basically shows
example.
the interest. It shows the interest of the people. That there is the need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Rory, do you have any final comments to this topic, and I'll just give the space for you.
But yeah, I think what we just discussed about what Isabel just discussed about Zalando, that's a really good story. I like that. I think you should use that as a case study more. It's kind of like power to the people at the end of the day. You make the company work essentially. Yeah, it's someone's idea and someone's product, but it's not anything unless it's got the engineers, the designers, the marketing people, the product managers, etc. Like, being the cogs in that machine. So, again, it's about just pushing something that can be a bit touchy and a bit uncomfortable into a more open conversation. I think that should be used as a case study for all companies, because if it was like that kind of action that actually made them take action, and maybe even especially with a company that's so big that goes through hyper growth, where you're probably not monitoring all these things in the way that you should do, and they have all that data there and they realize, wow, there is actually a massive pay gap within various different genders, etc., then that's just great that happens, and it's all down to that person. So that's really positive. And just something that Hang said about just focus on the things you can change as well, or play into your skills as well. Just focus on the bits that you can emulate as well, your key strengths, etc.
And I would even add to that, Rory, and everyone else, definitely focus in on your own skills, and then find the opportunities to share and mentor whenever you can, right? That's also a form of advocacy, in your own communities or friendship groups. I definitely have gained that from our open space UX in the process of building this experience and coming together, finding that safe space where you can have these conversations to kind of get the strength and confidence to go out and yell louder in the world or something. I think this is a great place for us to transition into questions from the audience. So I would pass it on to Hande, who's going to lead us. Thank you, everyone who's been putting in the Slido conversations. We're going to visualize it so it's easy for all of us in the audience as well as participants to address these. And Hande, the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. So I hope you can see my screen for the Slido questions. Let's start with the first and the most popular question. So the first question comes from, obviously, from one of our participants. So from management's point of view, how do they decide how much salary should they offer? Is there a scope of negotiation, is the question. Who would like to answer?
Well, I can give my perspective as manager as well, and as compensation. And again, I'm going to say the magic word, it depends. It depends on the company. If you work usually for a big company, you will have, as I said, positions like mine, who are in charge of putting certain ranges. So you never underpay anyone and you never overpay anyone, that it shouldn't be overpaid, and you control these gaps. So yes, managers in big companies usually have a range and have a budget. So there's a lot of things that go behind that we might not be aware, which is the budget that you have for the role, the range that you have for the role, and you might find some scope for negotiation depending on how, if you're getting promoted, if it's a pay increase on a performance review, if it's off cycle, if it's because you said you were leaving and they are counter offering you. So it depends. In small companies, when I worked in tech startups in the UK, it's true, my personal experience is that I had more room for negotiation. However, my budget might have been more limited. but for the right skill set, I would pay whatever it takes to keep. Maybe, and before we said something very interesting, startups tend to have more pay at risk and less base. So you have LTI programs, you have equity programs, you can have short-term incentives, and you can have some wellness programs as well, and some career growth that might help you with certain decisions. So I think I tried to answer as much as possible, but if there's any more things that I can
maybe,
clarify.
yeah, Rory raised a hand. Maybe you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd agree. It's hard to, it's different with every company. Some big companies have more money, but actually have tighter budgets with salaries. And generally, in my experience, the bigger companies actually have less room for negotiation. Whereas startups, I feel like the fight for like really good designers in startups is a bit more competitive. So like a big company that's relocating people from around the world, that has a really cool like brands that everyone wants to work for, they are pretty smart with it. They know that people will relocate to come and get that name on their CV. They know that having that name on their CV can be a bit of a foot in the ladder to an extent. And because they've got such a heavy influx of applicants, they can afford to be, not as generous with salaries and a bit more ruthless when it comes to the cutoff point. But that could also be to do with the fact that they have such big teams of designers, for example. So, if someone came in as a senior designer but was getting paid loads more than the others, then that runs a threat within itself of being quite disruptive. So I do understand that side of it. And then from the smaller companies, I feel those are the ones that are able to be a bit more sort of generous with the scope for like offering so much money for getting the right person on board, especially once people go through process in smaller companies, and if they're like really, really good, like superstars, unicorns, rock stars, whatever, they will generally craft like a job spec as they're having that discussion. So, talking about the benefits that they can deliver beyond the job spec, skills that they have, like war stories that they have about working on other apps and what they learned from this and how they can apply it to the product. So yeah, generally I'd say with regards, especially my experience as well, with scope to negotiation in salaries, it's a lot easier in smaller companies. Even though the pot of money is smaller, the negotiation's a bit easier as it is compared to big companies, because they've got more staff, and that could essentially be a bit more disruptive if people found out. Or they could all just advertise their salaries online with a clear career path, like I said.
Okay, cool. We do have a follow-up question, but I just want to get over the Slido questions really quickly. I think we covered this question as well. What is the average salary for a junior product designer in Berlin? How can you negotiate the salary after accepting the job? I feel like Hank was able to maybe give some answers. Who would like to tackle this question?
I can give some insight from my side. The majority of what I do is senior product designers, because that's the thing that my clients need the most. But I have worked on some junior roles, so I do have a little bit of insight. Again, it's quite hard to give a specific figure because different companies, different size, different funding, they're at different points in their roadmap. On average, I'd say between 40 to 50,000 euros per year is the average starting range for like a junior to mid product designer. And then how could you negotiate this further? Like I was saying before, if you once you get your contract outline, try and push on them to say, look, let's make a clear progression path and include salary negotiations and pay rises within that path, and set some metrics to work with, so you've got like some actual like KPIs to work towards as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and also I guess it comes down to being transparent and open, and having people around you who are on the same journey as you, I guess. That also helps. So for the third question, how does the pay gap of permanent employees compare to the pay gap of freelancers? I think this might be an interesting topic as well. What do you folks think about that?
I could maybe just say a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure any of us here are really experts in how to answer this, but you know, the difference is sort of between permanent employment and freelance employment is that, like, as a freelancer, you need to advocate for yourself constantly. And so it's a lot more onus on yourself to understand how to benchmark. And as Myrna was saying earlier, like, companies sort of look at freelancers. Maybe you can expand on this, because I've never heard that before. They look on freelancers to understand what day rates we're asking for. And sometimes I've noticed in my previous life as a freelancer, like, you can have a scope of your salary range, and then depending on the size or the type of project or the scope of the project, you can advocate for higher or lower day rates. I've also worked in civic tech, in which case I don't have the same level as I do when I'm working in enterprise. And so I think the real difference there is that as a freelancer, you have more ownership over how to advocate or, you know, push for a salary that you want. I don't know, Myrna, if you can expand on how the company perspective looks at freelancers more.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not going to sleep tonight because I don't have an answer. So I never looked at I never looked at the pay gap for freelancers. But what I can say, and mirroring to what Michelle said, freelancers tend to be very wise at positioning themselves with a skill set because they have to. It's a necessity. And that's why companies and the market data providers, the big companies that provide us with all this data, look into the freelancers in order to know which skill sets are highly paid or less paid. So and my feeling, and that's my feeling, and I bet with myself, that there's less pay gap in freelancers because they might be tending to be kept themselves more objective and asking them for their skill set.
Yeah, and I think then the pay gap happens in freelancing because you either are undervaluing yourself or you haven't done enough research about your worth in the market. So again, it's much more on the freelancer to kind of define their own value. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So for the next question, I don't know if we can answer that question from experience, but what Berlin companies are treating minorities better? I mean, if you have any companies that pop into your mind, go ahead and share.
And I guess that is an extension of the diversity topic, right? Diversity inclusion. Yeah. Hung, did you want to?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it because I did do some research. So I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, by the way. Very big advocate. No, but what I would suggest you always to do is, I think it's quite hard to give you names of companies, but I would really focus on companies that are of genuine interest to you to join. And I think, let's say, for example, create a list of your top 10 or 15 companies. Let's say, for example, you had a previous background in e-commerce, so just type up e-commerce tech companies in Berlin. And usually Google, just spits out a list of the top kind of 10 or whatever e-commerce tech companies in Berlin. And then I would literally go to LinkedIn, look for the company, go into people, and then see where they're coming from and where they're based. So this is where, LinkedIn gives you a really, I guess, a diverse set of information from what teams they're working in, where they're living, what education they have or where they studied. So there's lots of information there. And I think, this is how I would go about it. And this is how I used to go about it when I was a tech recruiter. We were looking for people to increase our diversity in my last company. And I had to use specific keywords to actually identify these people. So it's very interesting to hear and see now that you're looking for companies who do value minorities, diversity. So define the keywords, and usually what I like doing as well, as soon as you have your top companies, go to Kununu or Glassdoor and just really don't look at the 5-star ratings because they're inflated, but look, that's usually when HR goes back to them after a team event to say, hey, now you have to give your feedback, but look at the 3-star reviews, look at the 4-star reviews to really see what do the employees say about it? I think that's something that I really like doing, and had helped me a lot as well personally.
If I could jump in, one thing, or one good way I think you can judge how like diverse a company is on LinkedIn, if you just search the company page, you can look at the employees. And I'm trying to push this more in my the companies I work with to do, like present their data. You know, it's all about like, if you're going to say these things, then you need to honor them. You can have like a beautiful page about diversity and a statement, but does your company actually do that? Show us the figures. So like there's one company I'm working with, it's, without getting into too much detail, it's in the investment banking sector. So if you look at the founders page, it's very white, it's very male, it's not that appealing for a lot of people in the startup world. Whereas what we're doing is building like a super diverse team for like design, engineering. You know, it's a really big project. All the hiring managers and heads of design, etc., really on it with the whole diversity piece. But the problem that we have had is that people click on the page, and when you go to it, it's the website's designed to appeal to its audience and the product's audience, whereas what they want to do under the cover and the actual company is have a very diverse you know, team and company structure. So this is what I'm doing for them. I'm just doing like a LinkedIn search on the recruiter license where you can search for all the different people, and I'm just compiling the data so we can actually say to the candidates to say, oh, this looks like a boring old white man's company. So I can say, actually, if you look under the cover and actually in the people that work there, you'll see that it's actually super diverse. And again, this is another one of those things that I think we just need to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and make it the norm for companies to present this kind of stuff. And you know, if to the point where it should be like, if you're not presenting this, then what are you hiding? Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Isabel, you want to add to that?
Yeah, almost everything said, but yeah, I definitely encourage the people to have a look, maybe also especially at the leadership team, because if you just look at the employees, it doesn't tell you much. And it was also for me the decision why I went, for example, to Formel that we also have a female founder. And ultimately now we're basically, I mean, it's not all the range of diversity, but we are 3 female leaders and 3 male leaders. Yeah, this, I mean, this is something that then ultimately also trickles down into the company and into the values. So for us, for example, everything is about diversity, and up to our like sales funnel, where you can define your gender as male, female, or non-binary. So this is something, you know, that if it's in the head of the people, it will also trickle down.
Yeah. All right, cool. There is like there are 2 questions here. I feel they are related. Maybe that's my bias, but let's go over it. Why is it so much harder to get a pay raise if you stay with the same company than if you change companies? And this one, what does it take for a senior UX designer to become a team lead from the context of in the existing company and changing companies? Isabel, you want to tackle this, or no?
I'm still reading, you know. That's why my nose is so close to the camera. But maybe I can answer the first one. Why is it so much harder to get a pay rise if you stay in the same company? I mean, I can just guess on the reasons, because it was the same for me. So I think there's always a focus on getting new people on board, and in order to get the people on board, because they have like, especially depending on which area you work in, obviously, but for example, with the skill set of a product manager, if you are in the interview process, you generally have several options open, right? So if you as a company try to get someone, you have to really compete, right? And this is where all of a sudden let's say the full budget goes to, in order to get more people on board. But the people who are already in the company, you don't have to compete necessarily with any other employer, right? So that's just one of my thoughts on this. Maybe someone else has more ideas why it could be like that.
I just have a follow-up question on this. Like, isn't it expensive to hire new people, rather like cheaper to keep in the long run existing employees? I don't know.
It is. It is. And that's the sadness of it, right? So if you are not keeping your current employees that especially have all the knowledge, and you're not having the focus on that as well, then you might end up with someone who already decided to leave. And even if you give then a salary adaptation, it might be already too late. So it's definitely not something that you should do as a company. But yeah, it's there's always the focus on like growth and become bigger and you know, get more people on board, because you're always understaffed, right? So I assume that's yeah.
And I wonder if that's when, you know, those inside of a company and leadership roles should really be having regular conversations with their colleagues and employees around like where do you want to grow, how do you want to grow, what does this look like, and like really making like this one-on-one space and time to understand and mentor that potential. I don't know if anyone wanted to add. I'll hand back the Hande to take away.
Okay, all right. So yeah, since we are like running out of time, I do want to give the mic back to Michelle. So I will take 2 more questions and then I will hand over to Michelle. So maybe the second question that I had.
Brenda has something to say.
Sorry, Hande.
Of course.
Yes, I'm seeing a question that I guess we won't be answering, but could you also give some advice on workplace bullying? If someone after the call wants to speak about it or wants me to share more resources with them, Hande shared my LinkedIn profile. You can always contact me.
That's amazing. Actually, we were discussing this topic as well. When I saw the question, maybe this could be another event that we would like to tackle as a uncomfortable topic. All right, cool. That's nice to hear. So whoever this person asked the question, maybe they can contact Mirna to ask them directly. Okay, so back to the question, what does it take for a senior UX designer to become a team lead from the context of in the existing company or changing companies? Rory, I see your hand.
I don't know if I've got like the right answer for it, but I've got some advice. So like I was saying before about some, like a lot of people who will, like a product designer will work their way up to in a company like Zalando, get to senior product designer, you've got a great name on your CV, you've got lots of good experience, you've learned from some amazing people, but then to get up to that next level in a big organization like that can be quite hard sometimes. You know, maybe Zalando is a bad example, but you know, in a big company, because there's people above and generally everyone's super happy, so they don't want to leave. So that's why I'd say it's a good way to look at going to a smaller company where you can deliver lots of benefit for them, and there's designers who are less experienced where you can help them to grow. That's one good way to step up into leadership. Another good way is just to try and take on some mentoring. I know that this isn't quite the same as like cold hard people management and development on a day-to-day basis, but it's all these little things on your CV which will help to add up as well. And I do feel like a lot of recruiters, because we get so busy and so many applications, they don't really read into things too much, and they tend to just look at job titles. And the problem, which I've experienced a lot with senior designers who are actually like really good lead designers because they're leading teams of 3, because their title senior designer, it means that companies will just look at that and say, no, they don't have 3 to 5 years leadership experience, and work through them in such a manner. So if you were a senior UX and you had experience with mentoring, with leadership, you know, leadership in your current company, taking ownership of projects whilst guiding more junior designers, I'd like write a cover letter that details that, maybe even connect with someone in the company in LinkedIn and just sort of say, look, I've applied for this, I know my title's senior, I've got some experience doing this, because generally people will just skim CVs, and it's kind of sad that it happens, but just look at the titles and use that to compare whether or not you're you know, up to scratch with the role. And yeah, just do as much mentoring as possible, because I know there's lots of junior designers out there who'd look to have that as well. And I also know there's lots of top tier like lead designers who want to help mentor seniors up to that next step. Me and Hang were actually working on a project relative to that.
Yeah, so the person that's right in the chat as well, do you have any recommendations on how to start that out? And Hang did share the amazing design people list, which I also came across. I think it's a good space to become a mentor and a mentee as well. So yeah, please do check that out. For the next question, the questions changed. Okay, so how do you advocate transparency without being seen as a whistleblower? I think it's a good question, and we can end the Q&A with this question maybe. Who would like to tackle? Do we become that developer in Zalando maybe?
You could have, I mean, this is something which I saw in my hospitality days, but I just have a suggestion box for the staff. Just, you know, if there's anything that's a problem, anything you think we can improve with the company, just anonymous suggestions. And I mean, this is going back way back to like late 90s, early 2000s. So I'm sure there's got to be like a digital project or something like that where you could just not like anonymously give suggestions to it. And I think, yeah, just creating like an open culture where it's saying like, if you've got a problem, yeah, it's okay to raise it, and give people a platform where they can do it in a discreet manner. And also give people a notification to let them know that it's been seen and has been acknowledged as well.
Yeah, I mean, if especially I would say the employees that are for quite a while with the company, and also like very well situated in the company and seen as well, right? I mean, I wouldn't say that they will be seen as a whistleblower if they talk about these kind of topics, because ultimately they are the company, right? So you can't just not listen to them, right? So yeah, if you have the feeling that you would like to talk about this, and you see that you are very well situated in your company, then just speak up. I wouldn't be afraid of that.
Any additional comments from our other speakers, maybe? Right. I mean, we have other questions as well. End of the session.
Could I have a request? I'm really interested actually in Isabel tackling the pregnancy maternity leave one, because I know previously she and I have talked about that, and I think we're fortunate to have a woman who's in leadership who's also a mother, so her perspective is quite valuable, and I'd love to hear it.
Okay, could you read it out again? Sorry.
Do you think there's a lack of awareness around women's rights related to pregnancy, maternity leave, or that it is not worth leveraging them, retaliation, etc.?
I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, but so yeah. Do you think there's a lack of awareness around women's rights related to pregnancy? The question is like the lack of awareness from whom? So what I experienced,
so maybe the person can wrote in chat, Lucy, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, maybe you can go ahead and explain your question. That would be amazing. You can
this is so very hard to write very fast, right?
You can unmute and ask the question directly if you want.
Okay, thank you very much. I couldn't type fast enough. And the question had, I mean, you were limited in characters in Slido, so yeah. Anyways, so what I was what I wanted to ask was that, so basically women have rights in the workplace when it comes to pregnancy and maternity leave, and not getting discriminated against because you're getting pregnant or you're on maternity leave. And especially in Germany, you know, like the law is pretty clear that you are not to, you know, like be passed on a promotion because you're getting pregnant, or you are not getting like a downgrade into your in your position basically in the company when you come back. And I was wondering if you think that women are just like not aware of these legal, you know, these legal structures, or if they are afraid to leverage them, you know, in the company for fear of retaliation or something else.
That's a very good question. And yes, so I mean, I assume awareness, especially around the people that I know, the German people that I know, they're very much aware of their rights. I don't know how it is for like everyone else who comes to Germany to work. And if they don't, they should we should definitely communicate that better, because there are very strong legal rules around how to tackle that. Nonetheless, I did not make a very good experience in that area, which is why so it probably depends for whom you work. I would always recommend, regardless of who you think or how you think the people are thinking about that situation, always keep in mind like your priorities and just work on that. Don't expect other people to understand something, even if you think they might be able to do that. All of a sudden they're maybe not anymore, right? So always keep in mind your own interest. And for me, it was, for example, the point, I mean, I basically was the one who wanted to continue working very fast. So my proposal was that I will come back after 3-4 months, because I have the social system enabling this around me. But regardless of that, I wasn't believed, you know. So there was the thought that well, she will stay out of her job for at least a year. So for me, it was very clear at that stage that I will make a shift, definitely, and I did. So there are the rules, there are the legal let's say regulations on that. But on top of this, there's also reality. And I think it doesn't really, so for me at least, it didn't help me to speak out loud, because it also gave me a bad feeling and it wouldn't bring me forward anymore. But also, then again, it's very, I'm very selfish on that. If I would speak up more about it, it might not happen anymore in that company, right? So yeah, you have to find the way that is best for you. For me, it was definitely one very clear cut and saying, ciao, I'm gone. Also because it felt better to me. Yeah, that's all I can say to it.
All right, that was insightful. Thank you. All right, so I will pass the mic back to Michelle and stop sharing my screen. Hope that was helpful. I know I didn't cover all of the questions. And yeah.
Yeah, I can just take it from there. We're gonna move into kind of the closing part, which is where I've asked all of our speakers to kind of reflect on what the call to action might be to the audience. But before we do that, we just want to say, I'm posting in the chat for us, this is a free event. We don't request payments. We're not a legal entity to do that. However, we do believe in supporting organizations in our community. And so in the spirit of Pride Month, we have a suggestion for a Berlin-based organization that focuses on anti-discrimination and empowerment initiatives for the most marginalized parts of our queer community, such as migrant LGBTIQ people. If you want to say your thanks in other ways to us, we would love you to consider donating to this organization. And on that note, I will transition. So the idea is around the call to action is that we want to leave you with something that you might feel empowered by, and maybe you can relate to all of our speakers' call to actions, maybe just one, but we hope we have something to gather. So I will say, Isabel, will you start with your call to action to our audience?
Yes, get yourself a football soccer trainer. Football/soccer trainer. No, get someone who really motivates you and screams at you and makes you aware of what you're worth. That's a really good enabler. Yeah, to start a conversation.
Han, do you want to share your call to action?
I love that, Isabel. Yes, I think I'm taking this especially on the examples of all the Ironhackers who, come from different industries, had probably very bad salaries or different salaries, and now got some really good jobs and are really happy with the offer that they got. And be prepared, maximize your efforts by ideally talking to people who already navigated what you're going to navigate, and just really, confine in them and just really understand that you're not alone with this topic. And if you can, get a mentor and build the skill, because that's what negotiation is in the end. Build a skill and build the confidence. And take it.
Awesome. Thank you. Rory, do you want to share your call to action?
You muted.
Oh, I think your audio is muted.
So I said I've got so many already. I was going to say I really agree with like finding a mentor and or a soccer coach, having someone to speak with about these things, and that relates to my points as well. So mine are like individual things. They kind of are in a way. I'm saying calls to action would be push for your organization to just be more transparent about salaries, about gender diversity, and like the breakdown of inclusion and things like this. It's an awkward conversation to have, but as I say, the sooner we start addressing these things in a more open way, the sooner they'll start to become more commonplace, and we'll start to see a lot more progression in this space.
Michelle, you're muted.
The trend. You would think this far into the pandemic we would have solved this issue. Last but not least, Myrna, your call to action, please.
I think you are all expecting for me to say the objective, which is what I've been saying all this conversation around, but just come on, be proud of yourself. And do your research, do your homeworks, be prepared. Because if you're not prepared, you cannot expect the others to be prepared. So wow people. And remember me in 5 years' time when you start speaking about skill sets and you know the skill sets that you need to tackle.
That's fantastic. I think that's a great place for us to wrap things up, and we're doing very well on time. I'm impressed for all of us. There's been a lot of links floating around in the chat here. Some really important ones would be, Hande, if you could share quickly the survey again. We have created a post-event survey. We'd love to hear from you about your experience and takeaways. If you have uncomfortable topics we should address and you want to recommend, that's a good place to do it. Or if you want to recommend someone we should consider to speak. That's the place. And then I would say the last other really important thing is in the process of building this experience, we were all collecting from the Open Space UX team resources. So we've made those resources public. So if you want to dive deeper into other areas of the pay gap, including ethnicity pay gaps, what it means to be an LGBTIQ, how to break the ceiling, conversations that are happening elsewhere around this topic. This is a resource list that Hande has just shared for you. And I would want to say, if you can turn your audio on and give a round of applause, I think that's always a nice gesture as a way for us to say goodbye. So congratulations on tackling this uncomfortable topic and creating a space a safe space for us to explore it. And finally, we really appreciate everyone who's joined us today and participated, even if it was just witnessing. You're a part of the conversation now. So go on into the world and, you know, reflect on what you've learned here today. And we all wish you a wonderful evening and weekend, and lots of hearts and loves as you tackle other uncomfortable topics in your lives. So thank you so much.
Thanks,
We hope to see you soon. We hope
Yeah,
to see you soon in another time
absolutely.
with another topic.
Yeah, you can connect to us via also LinkedIn or etc. Keep in tune. You can add us on Eventbrite, all of the above. So awesome. Bye.